Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name is Luke Payson. Welcome back to everyone who's already a subscriber to the channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe so you can see more great interviews, including the one coming at you right now with first-time guest of the show, a 2-0 amateur undefeated MMA fighter, Maximillian Jarrell. Maximillian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Luke.
Great to have you on the show. I've talked to you in person a few times, got to interview you twice in the cage for 247 Fighting Championships, but honored to have you on MMA Fancast for the first time. It's kind of cool. A lot of times I meet people for the first time on video and then meet them in person, but you're opposite of that. Got to know you a little bit in person because you fought for 247 Fighting Championships now twice. We're 4 or 5 days removed from an incredible sold out, standing room only, Brawlenberg 20 at the Murrysville Sports Zone Arena. It was really spectacular. You picked up your second amateur MMA win. You are still a teenager for another 20 some days or so, in the
Yeah.
sense that you'll be turning 20. So happy early birthday. In, I guess, 21 days from now, you'll be turning 20. So you've gotten a lot done in a short time in your life. But before we get into your win for Brawlenberg 20, which people should still go out and get the pay-per-view from 247 Live and rewatch to be able to watch you and an absolute stacked 13 fight card. It was spectacular. Let's go backwards. What sports did you do growing up, and what led you to start training any form of martial arts?
I unlike a lot of people, I didn't like wrestle or anything like in high school. I never grew up wrestling or doing really combat sports or anything. When I was like real little, I played soccer and all that stuff. But growing up through like middle school and high school, my sport was always football.
Mm.
I always liked playing football, and I wanted to play for the middle school team or the high school team. But my family wasn't like the most in favor of it, which I get. But also being that I was like shorter, not like a massive kid, I wasn't gonna get the benefit of a lot of those, those hits. Um, but I always liked playing football. I just never, like I said, I never really got into like actually playing on any of the teams. So throughout middle school, throughout high school, I did, cross country, track. I was on the swim team for a while. So in hindsight, I got pretty comfortable doing a lot of those like more individual sports where I was a part of a team and we had team support, but when it came down to the moment, it was just you and you know what I mean? Um, so I got used to that kind of that individualistic side of sports, as well as also just enjoying football and stuff. But around, I think it was the summer right before freshman year of high school, um, I started getting I used to be really into like writing and directing in movies. The movie Warrior, the Tom Hardy
Warrior, yeah, the Tom
movie.
Hardy, yeah, the MMA
Yeah.
movie, great movie. Yep.
Yeah, I saw that, and it was just around that time I saw that, and for whatever reason, I started getting like clips and stuff of like the JRE on my YouTube, and I started hearing him talking about judo and jujitsu. And I remember saying to my mom one day, I was like, I kind of want to try out one of these, and I didn't even know what the difference was. I didn't know what like the differences were between judo and jujitsu, and we kind of like just looked them up on like Google, and it's like judo's a little bit more on the feet, and then you have like some slams, and then judo is or jujitsu is a little bit more like wrestling with submissions, right? And I was like, let's try jujitsu, why not? Just kind of picking out of a hat, right? um, and so I started with that. My dad started looking up gyms. One of his coworkers used to go to Stout. He vouched for it, and that's how we heard about Stout. And then, like 6 months prior to COVID, I started jujitsu at the old location in Cranberry. Um, and that was when I started training combat sports, like the first time. But I did that for like 6 months. I got two stripes on my white belt, and then COVID hit.
Mm.
Everything shut down. I wasn't able to do anything for a while. But by that point, I'd already kind of wedded myself to the idea that like eventually I'm going to do some striking. I might get into MMA a little bit. By this point, I'd started to watch some UFC. I was really into that. Uh, and after a lot of convincing, I was able to get my parents to sign me up for Muay Thai in like August of 2020, right as things with COVID were starting to loosen up a little bit. The gyms were kind of secretly opening back up
Mhm.
again, you know. And so that's really when I kind of credit my start with it, was like August or September of 2020, when I got back into Stout and started with Muay Thai, kickboxing, that sort of thing. That's when people ask me when I started, that's really when I say I started, because it was from that point on, with when I started doing the striking, the kickboxing, Muay Thai, etc. I was like, okay, this is my kind of thing, you know, this is something I want to do. So that's generally when people ask when I started, I'd say around that time, you know.
Well, I appreciate the background. So I would have put you at being like a young 16 when you started, an
Yeah.
old 15 because of when your birth date falls. You've certainly accomplished a lot. That time for anybody was super challenging. I think it was probably challenging if people were like later in their MMA career and still trying to take fights, and then they couldn't really train, couldn't really fight. Of course, for you trying to get started, it was a challenge. But clearly you've caught up. Let's quickly review your amateur debut because you're not new to MMA now because you've coming off your second fight. Recap it real quick. What was the nerves like? What was the overall experience like? Both of your fights have been for 247. So, what do you remember? What did you learn from your first fight?
My MMA debut, I mean, it was my first MMA fight, but it wasn't my first like fight, you know. My first fight was I had a Muay Thai fight in
Mm.
May of last year, and that was where I really, the lessons I learned from that, if I had won that Muay Thai fight, and that's, you know, that was another fight where it was a split decision. I was on the wrong end of it that time. But I had a lot of people telling me that, you know, they didn't think I should have been. It was closer than, you know, one of the cards this last weekend. Um, but that was a fight that I had a lot of people telling me I probably should have won. But I'm glad I didn't, because if I'd have won that fight, I don't think I would have won my debut. I learned so much from that Muay Thai fight back in May. Um, the biggest thing was, you know, I went into the Muay Thai fight, and I had spent so long getting my mind into that mindset of like war, anger, violence, you know, all that stuff. And there's always a place for that. But going into my MMA debut with 247, I was like, I just need to have fun. You know, I need to get my mindset back to a place where I can do what I do in the training room every day and just have fun doing it. And so that was the biggest thing going into it. So the nerves were way less than they were for, you know, my first fight and back in May, that Muay Thai fight. And the nerves going into my debut, they were still there. Um, but it was they were nerves that I could like kind of easily mask with just excitement, because I was like, this is where I want to be. I was present. I felt much better. I told a lot of people, you can see the difference between when I walk out for my Muay Thai fight and I've got like game face on, just angry. I'm like, I'm, you know, walking into Vietnam right there, right? And then I walked out to my debut and I was like, you know, smiles, looking around at people, giving people high fives, that type of thing. Um, and as soon as, you know, the first bell starts, then I kind of, I don't have to force it, because as soon as the first bell goes, you know, the lights go out, the switch is flipped at that point. Everything else is so ingrained into my head. I don't need to worry about putting all that added pressure on me, getting my mindset where it needs to be. As soon as the first bell goes, I'm there. That was a big thing I learned going into that debut, was just having fun with it. Because if I'm having fun all the way leading up to it and in the fight itself, that, you know, the kind of vicious, violent intentions that I need to have, they'll just come out naturally, you know. And I think they did. That first debut went pretty well for me. And I think a lot of it is because of the lessons I learned, following that kickboxing fight back in May. It was a
And
much more fluid performance.
yeah, and it's great not only that you're developing your athletic side and the skill side, the muscle memory side, the flow state, but also sounds like you're learning already the mental side of the sport, whether it's and people don't always realize that you can get yourself geared up too much, where, like you said, where you're a little bit too much in your burning energy, you're a little over focused, over fixated. That can be its own thing. There's usually a balance, and being a little fun, enjoying yourself, and then being able to turn it on is probably a better use of your energy. What were you focused on as far as coming into your second fight, the fight that happened just last week on the 24th, under a week ago? Were there things you were trying to focus on and do? And then summarize the fight. It went all 3 rounds, ended up being a split decision that most people, that weren't the judges, of course, thought that it really shouldn't have been a split decision, that it probably should have been a unanimous decision to you. But regardless, what was that fight like for you? What were you working on coming into it? And overall, how do you feel that fight went?
The biggest thing I wanted to do between my debut and that fight was, I really wanted to get the finish in that last fight this past weekend. I knew that after like watching my debut, the kid that I fought there was much more kind of trying to counter strike me. He was much more willing to play off of the back foot, and that meant that I had to kind of set traps and work my entries getting in there, which is, clearly I can do that. I feel comfortable doing that. I feel okay playing at that range, because I feel comfortable playing at a lot of different ranges, but I can do that well. With Val, watching his last 247 fight prior to me, which was against Cam Smith sometime last year, watching that, I knew that Cam or Val he was gonna be much more aggressive, and that meant that he was gonna walk into something, and I knew that if I could just set the proper traps, he was gonna walk at me, and I wouldn't have to go chasing him and do as much setting up for those big shots. I knew he was just gonna walk into it, and that ended up happening. I early in the first round, the first minute was pretty chaotic. I had a game plan that I went in there with. I thought that I was gonna be able to execute this, perfect combination, get him out of there in the first few seconds.
Mm.
And Val had other plans, which, as he should. It ended up being a much more exciting first minute than I expected it to be. But still, a few seconds in, we get up from a scramble. He ends up walking right into a shot. And then in the span of like 30 seconds, I dropped him twice. And, a few seconds later, that liver kick really stunned him. That hurt him bad. I thought I was going to be able to get him out of there with that too. You were talking to Ryan. I had plan A was that right hand.
Yep.
Plan B was that left kick. And in about 90 seconds, he ate both of those and was still throwing haymakers, which that was a good experience. I needed something like that to put me in the fire and really figure out what I was made of. So no matter what, it wasn't my best performance. I don't think I didn't get to show all of the different levels of my ability, but I'm glad that it happened the way it did in hindsight. That's getting a fight like that so early in my career,
Mm.
where I get to, I've talked about it. Like I have two different sides of the spectrum in terms of my first 247 fights. I was able to go against a counter striker who wasn't so much willing to engage with me, but I had to kind of chase him down, set traps. And then I had Val last weekend, who was very willing to engage with me, and just nonstop pressure, always in my face. Tough, tough dude. I just couldn't get him out of there. Um, but going into it, I wanted that finish. And so when I hurt him in that first round, I was very kind of eager to get him out of there. And what a lot of people didn't realize was he actually hurt me like right after in that first round. I had him dropped. He got up both times, and we broke off, and he landed a really clean knee right up the middle. And the commentary called it out real quick, but I tried to put on a pretty solid poker face, and no one really picked up on it. But Val had me jacked up for a few seconds there. I felt that the rest of the round. Um, so being in there, I was just like, I remember thinking, just get him out of there, get him out of there. Even after the first round, I was like, I'm ready to put this guy away. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And Val was not going anywhere, and to have a fight like that so early, where it's just the guy who just won't go away, won't go away, won't go away, and kind of getting that first fight out of the way where I wanted to get the finish, went in there with the intent to get the finish, really hurt the guy, almost got the finish, and still he was just going up against someone who's tough enough to push through that. I'm glad that I was able to get that kind of fight, done 2 fights into my MMA career where I can feel that, like, some guys just some guys just aren't going to go anywhere. You know what I mean? That's something I'm glad I got out of it. Given that going into it, like, to answer the original question, I wanted that finish. You know what I mean? That's what I wanted, and I'm still going to be looking for that next time out.
Well, that's a great like after action report in the sense that I think when you fight like you want to get a finish, you fight at a good tempo, which is what you did. And if you can
Mhm.
hold that tempo like you did, end up winning a decision. A lot of guys that fight like they want to win in the first round, if they're still around in the third, they gas, which of course you didn't do. So I think you're doing everything right. Hats off to Val. I had gotten some information from Ryan Kavanaugh in order to do a very cool part of 247's broadcast, which is me sort of on the entrance side where the ramp is, or in this case, it was just the entrance. Your first debut, it was the elevated walkway, but and I do a little bit of like a sideline reporter. And
Mhm.
I had said that because you had done a prediction privately, but not for your opponent to hear. But by the time we're doing the broadcast, he can't hear it. And we had talked about, and I said it that in the first round, in the first exchange or so, you're going to be looking for a liver kick to stun him and then finish him up. And you did stun him, but it was like a split second. I mean, you got him, you kicked the
Yeah.
liver, you kind of stunned, but then came right back to it. So it was a great back
Yeah.
and forth fight. I also think it's cool, like you're saying, that you can already like appreciate and respect the fact that fighting Val was probably, a hard fight for your second fight, a good fight to have a guy that's just tough. For people that were watching UFC probably 10, 15 years ago, Clay the Carpenter Guida got famous for that, where he
Mhm.
his skill level was there, but it was also just the grinding, just the coming at people. Even if they were out striking him and he was a bloody mess, he was still chasing them down. So obviously, it was a great fight. You've given us kind of the viewpoint of sort of some of the things you're looking for. So at this point, it's just a matter of 247 has been announcing that they have a doubleheader April 19th and 20th coming up at the Hollywood Casino at the Meadows. And they've actually, I think, announced that they're up to 3 or 4 fights matched. Are you looking for the legendary Jim Mooney to match you for either the grappling component, if you just want to focus on jiu-jitsu, or MMA for April, or is that yet to be decided?
I mean, officially it's yet to be decided. I need to. That's one of the things that I'm not going to speak out of turn with my
Sure.
coaches behind me, over my ear. Not that they would be like opposed to it or anything like that. Um, but that's just one of those things. I'm tempted to take a couple months. I'm tempted to look more at that June card with 247 and take some time to, one, just for myself, get in better shape. Not, I have a lot of faith in my cardio. I don't think it hasn't failed me yet. That pace with Val was pretty solid, and my cardio held up the whole time. Um, but sometimes I'm looking back at the replays and I'm like, man, I feel like I'd enjoy this fight a lot more if I had abs. You know what I mean? So there's a little bit of that.
You'd
But there's
enjoy
also,
watching yourself back if you had abs. I don't
yeah.
know if abs are necessarily. Ask Big Country Roy Nelson if abs are necessary for a fight. But you fight at 145 and at 45,
Yeah,
a lot of guys have abs because of the
right,
'cause
exactly.
how leaned out you are. Yeah.
And I don't plan on, staying at 45 forever either. That's part of the plan is, as I, grow, get a little bit
Sure.
leaner.
Yeah.
I'm not built to be fighting guys like Volkanovski or Holloway, you know what I mean? So staying at 45 long term isn't exactly the plan. But I do want to take some time. I want to get in a better shape just for myself, and I want to work on a couple areas of my game that could still be rounded out because now 2-0. You see guys like just last weekend, Cowboy Eddie. He's was 3-0 going into a title fight.
No
I
shot.
get one more win. Like I said to Hunter, after this last weekend, I get one more win. I'm expecting within 1 to 2 more fights to be looking at some titles. You know what I mean? And I don't want to get into that position and have a drop off because I wasn't properly prepared. So I would like to take a little bit of time, at least as where I stand right now, I'd like to take a little bit of time just to round out some of those areas before I look to come back. That said, I really hate the shin guards.
Yeah.
And so I'm very tempted to just kind of push through one more quick fight, get rid of those shin guards, get my 3-0 record, and jump into those advanced amateur rules, because both the ground and pound and yeah, I'm sure you saw there were one or two situations I had in the fight with Val where I believe if I had ground and pound, I don't think it would have gone,
Well,
all
yeah.
its
Anytime
way.
you're knocking your opponent down in MMA rules that allow ground and pound, the finishes are much
Right.
more likely. And obviously, you'll talk it over with your coaches. You are coached by Coach Mike Wilkins and Coach Will Morale, both of whom are two-time coaches of the year for 247, and you're training
Yeah.
at Stout Pittsburgh, which is the two-time gym of the year. You gave us the background of how you got connected through your dad's friend, and so obviously that's a great home for you. They're great coaches. It For me, it almost would seem more logical time wise that if you're going to take a developmental break to really push your development, that break after your novice career is over and before your advanced amateur might make more sense just because it's a bigger rule set and you need 9 minutes. You need your cardio, even though your cardio is good. You need to be able to go a 9 total minutes as opposed to 6 minutes. But obviously, the coaches will figure out a game plan. Maybe you end up taking time off between now, to developmental time off between now and your next fight, and then again after your last novice. Who knows? But yes, in the state of Pennsylvania, a 2-0 record means that you're guaranteed to fight at advanced amateur, but you have to have that third fight, whether that's
Yeah.
3-0 like you plan to be or 2-1. I personally think that the state could make the exception that if you're 2-0, then you're guaranteed to have a 2-1 record. It's not like you. So to
Right.
me, if you're 1-1, then it should be yes, you have to fight in order to see if you can get 2-1. To me, that would make like Val coming into that fight was 1-1. Had he won, he would be eligible for advanced amateur. He
Mhm.
lost 1-2 strictly by the rules. He wouldn't be eligible for advanced amateur, though every once in a while somebody might look at that fight and say that he showed himself enough going back and forth with you and getting a split decision. Who knows? But certainly a lot to think about. It's always great having a first time guest on the show. You remind me a lot, and this is a high level compliment. You remind me a lot of Cam the Mallrat Allgaier, who was very young when he first started fighting for 247 out of the
Yeah.
Gorilla House gym. Young guy, um, you know, as a compliment, kind of nerdy looking in the sense of fresh faced, young glasses, a
That's
real
where my
killer.
mind went to. I get it.
A real killer. It's not like he wasn't a fighter. I mean, at one point he had a 6-0 amateur record and was the two-time defending champ of 247 at 35, where you've hinted that you might eventually get to 35 as you develop and as you. So I say that as a compliment because watching Cam weigh in and have his first fight and you weigh in and have your first fight, I think it's great of what MMA, like when I was listening to your background, you were saying football at your size, that's what's nice about MMA.
Hmm.
If you're an absolute brute, you got heavyweight. If you're
Yeah.
small and sort of technical wrestler, you can go all the way down to 125. In your case, 45, maybe 35. And I think that's an advantage. And you mentioned I used to coach college track and field. You mentioned swimming and track and some of the individual sports. And I think one of the advantages of the individual sports is a lot of those individual sports, like you said, you get the benefit of the team, but you already get the mindset that it's you and you.
Hmm.
You're really competing against yourself. Even a sport like tennis, like all the individual sports are really focused on your own individual performance. Of course, wrestling is kind of the most obvious connection to MMA because of the weight classes, because of obviously the competitive, and it's a non-armed combat, unarmed combat. So, but certainly very cool to have you on the show. Anybody coming out of Stout obviously is well prepared. You had several other teammates on the card. I believe you guys went 3-1 on the card, and of course that one, your teammate Joel Martinez was a split decision loss. You had a split decision win. So great night for Stout. And obviously, co-main event was Lucas the Sniper Seabird, who I was hoping to have on tonight. We're hoping to reschedule. He had some things come up, but he looked about as incredible as you could look in your pro debut. And I'm sure, well, I guess we can end on this. How much, and there's some other incredible fighters in the gym. It's not just Lucas, but how much do you look at Lucas and the other guys in the gym that are, going from the end of their amateur career into pro, like Lucas? Lucas ended up being 5-0 as an amateur, winning the 247 belt, going into his pro debut, winning his pro debut. Do you kind of see that as the game plan, in the sense of really maximize your amateur career to really develop your skills, and then at some point, relatively young, turn pro?
Yeah, I mean, I've said for, as long as I've like known Lucas and really been following him, that and a lot of people, I'm not just the only one, lots of people say it, but he's kind of blazing the trail in terms of how to really do this, and not just have a successful amateur career and then go pro, but how to have a successful career long term. Because, like everyone knows, there's as many people love him, there's a lot of people that don't like him, but at the end of the day, they're both paying to watch him fight. And that's how you're going to get a long career in this sport. And so as someone who wants to have that kind of career, watching him not just in the training room to see, oh, he's doing this right, he's doing this right, seeing how that translates over to his fights, but watching him as a person and as a figure both in the training room and on social media and in life in general, watching how he does things and how he succeeds, that's the path that I'm like, okay, if I want to have success here, if I want to really make this work, this is what I have to do. This is the path I have to follow. Um, and so many other things beyond just his amateur, like people know that he went 5-0, he won the belt at 247, and then he just won his pro debut. But things like I mentioned, going off and working on other elements of my game. I mean, Lucas went to he's done so many things in terms of like grappling, high level grappling, whether it be wrestling at WVU or going to what ADCC. I mean, the amount of accolades that he has is impressive, win, lose, or draw. And just doing those kinds of things and developing those skills in the training room, seeing how it all kind of translates into the kind of person that he is. I'm like, that's the path I have to follow. And there's so many people at the gym. Another one fighting next weekend, Luke Martin. He's another guy who what he knows, he's on a path right now. It's not just a path of a good, amateur career into a professional career. Like, he's on that path to having a legitimate, career in the sport. And those are the guys that I want to, surround myself with and look up to. And so, yeah, when Lucas does the things that he does, going 5-0, expanding his game in all these grappling realms. He had a Muay Thai fight scheduled to expand his striking game as well, and then, winning his pro debut and all the things you see him doing outside of the sport. Yeah, I look at that and I'm like, that's what I got to be doing. So absolutely, watching him is massively helpful.
Well, it shows how much of a student of the game you are, and how much gym, the milieu of the gym really rubs off on other people. I had Lucas Martin on this show as a former Division II national wrestling champ. That's, super high level wrestling, and then connected to Lucas Siebert from WVU when they were both at WVU, and Lucas Siebert kind of sold him on Stout, on your gym. Well,
Yeah.
the gym you train at. And Lucas is now Luke Martin, who's also a Lucas, but I think he goes by Luke because it's less confusing.
Mhm.
But Luke Martin is on that path too, right? Moved up, just like Lucas Siebert moved from Ohio into Pennsylvania, into Pittsburgh, in order to pursue at Stout. So it's really quite, and Stout's always been known to develop great fighters, but now you've got this group all right around the same weight class, you and the two Lukes. And I think that matters. We remember, if you roll back the clock before the big split with Bang Ludwig and all of that, Team Alpha Male, before the drugs and all the stuff they got in trouble for, Team
Yeah.
Alpha Male kind of did it. Like, sometimes you need, and if you go to the big boys, Team Death Clutch, the short-lived Brock Lesnar gym, like sometimes you need really talented fighters that are all somewhat around the same weight class to be able to push each other in training. Really fantastic having you on the show. it's been a blast. We could keep going, but for now, first time, we'll leave more for the next time you come on. You can listen to Luke Bass of MMA Fancast with first time of many times guests on the show, Maximillian Jarrell, 2-0, undefeated amateur MMA fighter out of Stout, Pittsburgh, just having fought on Brawl in the Berg 20 for 247 Fighting Championships. Thanks so much for coming on.
Appreciate it, Luke. Thank you.
You got it.